Hey guys, welcome back. Given my lack of content, I thought I'd just share this job with you. It's going to be a little bit of a follow along and see what happens type of deal. So 2012 Multistrada, so no start basically. The story goes, let's turn it on. Do I have the key in my pocket? Yes. Oh, what? Neutral. It's got a slightly dodgy neutral switch as well, I think, but that isn't the reason it won't go. Oh, for frog snacks. Come on now. Got a strap around the clutch. The neutral switch isn't the, it's got a slightly dodgy gear position switch, which is not the reason why it won't go. So the story is, so ooh. Lot of smoke then. So the story is he filled it with fuel and pushed his bike away from the pump, went and got himself a chocolate bar and a coffee, sat there, ate his food, went to start it, and it initially fired up and just ran for a couple of seconds, petered out and died. My first thought when I spoke to him on the phone was, did you put diesel in it? But he assures me he didn't. Yeah, so that's where we're at. I might just, there's no engine check light. Just wondering whether I'll scan it or not for codes. Probably not. It just, I don't know whether you noticed then. Yeah, it's not exactly sprightly turning over. I think I'll put a jump pack on it first. Let's get it to crank quickly and see where we end up. So I've got my Genius boost connected. Awesome piece of kit that. I think this might be a short video, guys. I just cranked it then and it fired. See if I can get it to do it again. That's smoke. I have a load of throttle. I've got a horrible feeling he has actually put diesel in it. It doesn't smell diesely. Let's drain the fuel out of it, see what that's like, or drain some fuel out of it. It's definitely fucking diesel. If you want a top tip, don't spill it on your fucking yard. So the moral of the story is, don't always believe the customer. The customer isn't always right. So, and he swears blind he didn't put diesel in it, but that's what's come out of the tank. And there's even, I'm not sure we're going to get that, I've also managed to suck up a little bit of water as well. So for comparison, and I know they're different size vessels and stuff, but that's unleaded in there. And this is what's come out of that Ducati tank. Now, so how do you tell the difference? Most of us have got a built-in diesel detector. I know my nose, I actually quite like the smell of unleaded fuel, and I really can't stand the smell of diesel. So yeah, I couldn't really, to be fair though, I couldn't really smell it when I stuck my nose in the tank. It didn't really smell that diesely. But anyway, I spilt a load of it all over myself. My siphoning pipe, the little pump thing, came off the end and it went all over the place. So yeah, so the diesel, I don't know whether this is going to come out that well on camera, but can you see it's quite sort of oily, and petrol has got a much thinner viscosity, and I'm not sure if this is going to work on camera, but we'll see. If I tip a little bit of diesel in here, can you notice? Let's get the light closer. Can you see that sort of oily mixing going on there? Anyway, so what we're going to do about it now, a lot of people, which is why you might have found this video, I think I'm going to call this video Diesel Ducati. So I kind of gave the game away right at the beginning of the video with a title, so you've kind of known what was going on right from the get-go. So you've put diesel in your motorbike, what the hell are you going to do? Now, a lot of people will get excited and tell you that, oh, there'll be a sharp intake of breath and it's a fucking big nightmare, pardon the swearing. The people that do that are usually the people that are going to profit from your mistake. Petrol in a diesel engine can actually be quite damaging, but that's beyond the scope of this one. We're not going to go into that. Diesel in a petrol engine, if it's a fuel injected bike, all you really need to do is drain the tank completely, so you can either take the tank off, take the fuel pump out and get it all out that way, or just suck it all out with a sucker. And then what I would do is I'd put a gallon of unleaded in, and then I'd run the fuel pump, so turn the ignition on and off so the fuel pump primes, and that will pump the fuel through the fuel rail, past the injectors and back round into the tank. Actually, that's not true, is it? Because some bikes have a return line and some don't. If your bike's got if it's fuel injected and it's got 2 fuel lines to it, so what would be a good example? Like a lot of the old Honda systems have 2 lines, early Ducatis have 2 lines. If you've got 2 lines, that means you've got a line from the pump, which goes to the fuel rail with the injectors on, and then the other line goes back to the fuel tank. If you've got that set up, put a gallon of fuel in the bike and turn the fuel pump on. So usually that just means, fucking hell, you're waffling, Jim. Usually that means just turning the ignition on and having the fuel pump prime. That'll force fuel up through all the fuel lines, and then basically the fresh fuel you've put in the tank will flush out the fuel line. Do that a few times and then drain out that fuel again. Drain that gallon of fuel you put in the fuel tank back out of the tank. Brim the tank with fresh fuel and then try starting it, and you'll 9.999 times out of 10 it'll start. There'll initially be a little bit of smoke and it'll be fine. If you've got one fuel line from your fuel tank, you can't circulate the fuel. Basically the sort of return line is part of the pump, so the pressure release valve is on the... Anyway, don't want to go into that. If you've got one fuel line, really you want to be taking the fuel line off and blowing it through with an air line. At a pinch you can fill it with, make sure the tank is empty, fill it with fresh unleaded and try and start it, and eventually once you've cranked and cranked and cranked and the injectors have opened enough and you've got enough fuel into the injectors, it will fire up and it'll smoke. There'll be a lot of white smoke in any case, whichever system you have, and just go for a nice gentle ride and you'll probably be all right. Yeah, there's a bit more to it than that, but I don't want to go down a massive rabbit hole with this. But if you've put diesel in your petrol motorbike, don't panic too much. If it's carbureted, drain the float bowls and fill the float bowls back up with fresh. Obviously, drain the fuel tank of the diesel and drain the float bowls on the carburetors. Pretty much every carburetor in existence has drain screws on the bottom of the float bowls. Drain out the carbs, fill them with fresh fuel and run it, and you'll probably be okay. You'll get a lot of white smoke. Yeah, so let's suck all the fuel out of this Ducati and put some fresh fuel in it, and let's see where we end up. And then one other thing probably worth noting is if you've been trying to start it with the diesel in the tank, there's quite a good chance you might have oiled up the spark plugs. So you may be in a position where you've got to take the plugs out, and I wouldn't bother cleaning them, just bosh a new set of spark plugs in. That's kind of good practice really when you've had fuel contamination. Start with a new set of plugs. Right, let's go and sort this bike out. You can really smell it when you get it on your fingers. I really do not like diesel. I mean, I like diesel engines, but I don't like it in a petrol engine or on my hands. Right, okay, so that's as much of the fuel out as I can get. There may be a few little dregs in the bottom. Now, I'm not sure this is going to come out that well on camera. This design has got two, this is the fuel pump on the bottom of the fuel tank, and it's got two pipes to it. It's got a flow and it's got a return. So the fuel pump pumps fuel out of one pipe, sends the fuel to the fuel rail, and then there's a pressure release valve, and then it comes back on the return line back into the tank, so that the fuel is constantly on a circuit around from the pump up to the fuel rails, back to the tank, and the pump circulates the fuel. So the injectors have got fuel pressure constantly. Because I've got this type of system where the pump is pumping the fuel around the fuel system, what I'm going to do, now I've got 99.9% of the fuel out, I'm going to put some fresh unleaded in and just let the pump run and basically wash out the fuel line, and then I'm going to suck that fuel out. I'm going to pretend that I didn't see that little bit of water that we initially saw with that first bit of fuel I sucked out. Once I've got it running, I'm going to basically do as little as possible to get it running at this point, and then, because I've got other work to do, I'm going to take the fuel filter out and make sure there isn't any water in there and dry the tank out properly. But let's pretend it's you doing it and you just want to get your bike back on the road as quick as you can. So I don't think I've got any fuel. I'm going to have to go fill my jerry can up. We'll put a gallon of fuel in, we'll let the pump do its thing, wash all the fuel lines out, and then I'll suck that fuel back out and I'll put more fresh in. And so long as the spark plugs aren't completely hideous, I think it will probably fire up. Yeah, so when you do a normal siphon job, you struggle to get the last little bit of fuel out. So I've got this little, bought this years ago, this little pumpy thing. It's actually meant for oil, sucking oil out from down a dipstick, but it works brilliant. I've put fuel through it loads of times and it works, seems to work fine. So I've got a little piece of whether we can see that, I've got a little piece of stainless steel wire inside this tube, so it's nice and stiff. And then you can turn this little jobby on and poke around inside the tank and get the last dregs of fuel out. So if you're doing yours, you need to, whatever your method is, you really do need to get as much of it as you can out. You know, if you're leaving a little tiny smidgen in the bottom, it's not the end of the world, it's going to mix in with the petrol, but yeah, you get the idea. Oh, got some more there. Righty-ho. So, I've put about 2 litres of fresh unleaded in the tank. Turn the ignition on and off a few times, which runs the fuel pump. So that's pumped fuel around the fuel rail and back into the tank. Swished the tank around a bit. Then I sucked all the fuel out, and to be fair, it came out and it looked perfectly fine and clean. And I used my little pumpy sucky thing, and I've got it as dry as I possibly could. Doesn't seem to be any water in there now. And then I've put a couple of gallon of fresh unleaded in, and we'll see if it goes. It's on life support from the van at the moment because the battery was getting a bit low. Let's see what goes. Are you going to turn on even? Yes. If it starts, it's going to smoke like buggery. Right, here we go. Oh, I've got no neutral light. Hang on a minute. Oh, this bloody neutral switch. I took this off. I've got a strap for the clutch lever. Right, let's put that back on. Give me a second. Right, got my clutch strapped up. That was easy. Whoa. Let it warm up gently. Fair play. So that's that then. So the takeaways: if you've put diesel in your bike, don't panic. Basically, if it's fuel injected and you have 2 pipes to fuel pump, then it's slightly easier than if you've got 1 pipe. If I had 1 pipe in this situation and I couldn't circulate the fuel around through the system, I'd just have to crank it longer. The pump would run and the injectors would open and close, and you'd need to basically get the diesel out of the fuel line and the injectors, so you were getting some unleaded or some proper petrol, and then it would fire up. There's a danger, of course, if you keep trying to run it on diesel, cranking it, you're just going to oil up the spark plugs, foul the plugs, and you'll struggle to get it going. So you might find yourself in a situation where you've got to put a set of spark plugs in. And then with carburetors, I briefly touched on it, I think. You'll need to drain the float bowls, and obviously drain the tank in a similar sort of way. And then what I would do is I'd fill the carburetors with fuel, with fresh fuel from the fuel tank, and then turn the fuel tap off again and then drain them again, if you see what I mean, if that makes sense, and then refill them and then try and start it, and you'll probably be okay. But again, you might need spark plugs. That's that then, guys. Vaguely interesting, and it might help somebody if you've filled your bike with diesel and you're panicking. The textbook way, really, I should probably say, what should really happen now, and I think I'm going to pull the tank anyway, is it wants a new fuel filter. And I'm pretty sure I got all the water at the bottom of the tank, because I did find a little bit of water. Come on, Jim, you're waffling. So I'm going to pull the tank anyway and just take the fuel pump off the bottom of the tank and have a proper look in there and change the filter. Not strictly necessary, but good practice. Right, thanks guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.